On this brief video, I want to talk with you about the problem of disembodied language. The biggest problem of our usual way of talking, which I call disembodied language, is that since we do not listen to ourselves while we speak, we have no real experience while we are speaking. So there is a disconnect in disembodied language between what we say and how we say it, because we're not listening to ourselves. And that is our usual way of talking. So that's why I call it disembodied language, because there is no connection. Yeah, the speaker and the listener seem to be separate. The speaker, who am myself, and my listening is not happening while I'm speaking. So I try to predetermine how I'm being perceived by talking in a particular way to impress you or to get your attention or to distract you or to manipulate you, to dominate you. But that is all predetermined speech, acted speech, performative speech. And then, of course, there's also what happens after I have spoken. I suddenly realize, like, oh, that was not good, or I should have said this, or I should have that. So then the listening happens afterwards, so to speak. You kind of realize, like, oh gosh, I created all this havoc with the way I was talking. But when you listen to yourself while you speak, you engage in a different way of dealing with your language, because the speaker and the listener is one and the same person. Yeah. So what I am wanting to address in this video is that when you are engaging in your usual way of talking, yeah, you do not listen to yourself. You always end up struggling with other people. You're always having an argument. You're always having a conflict. But also when you're just by yourself, you still seem to be having a conflict. You're never at ease with yourself. You're never calm. You're never resolved about things. There's always something bothering you. Something is missing. Something needs to be figured out. There's always some aversive kind of stimulation, so to speak, which keeps you on your toes and which keeps you, I don't know, active or reactive, I should say. In any case, that is all dealing with, by the way, neurobiology, because whenever there is some sort of threat, you are activated in some kind of fight, flight, freeze reactivity. Now, the problem with all of that is that, as I was just saying, there is no connection between what you say and how you say it. There's no experience while you speak. You are just verbally carried away, or you're focused on the other people who you want to convince or who you want to dominate or impress or whatever. And you don't want to make a fool of yourself, so you want them to see a certain part of you, and other parts you try to hide or you try to not talk about. And so there's all these kind of mechanisms going on which create conflict and dualism. And yes, you are, of course, also kind of paranoid that you will be found out, because you are just pretending. You are just making it seem as if you are a certain way. You want other people to believe what you believe. And so you pretend that that is who you are. You pretend to be who you believe to be, and you try to convince other people about that. But you are not who you believe to be, because inner language does not exist. I know this all goes over your head, but that doesn't matter. You just got to take my word for it. Inner language does not exist. No, your mind does not exist. Your internal dialogue does not exist. So who you believe to be is just simply not true, because inner language doesn't exist. Only what you say is true, in the sense that it is overt, it can be heard. And so, yeah, what you say is what you have said, yeah? And no, it's not about what is in your head. There's no language in your head. No. And you cannot think about your language, because there's only what you can say. There's only the words you have, which you remember, which you have access to, so to speak. But there's no inner language that you project outward, because there is no inner language. So there's only your neurobiology, which was conditioned by language previously, which allows you to talk in the language that you speak and to have access to the words that you want to say. And yeah, you only have so many words. But my point of this video is the following. And all of this, what I'm saying, is kind of like a context in which that point that I'm making is to be considered. The point I am making here is that we in our disembodied language, which goes on everywhere, 24/7, and regardless of culture. Yeah. So regardless of whether we live in an affluent society or in a very impoverished society or a war-torn society or a communist society or capitalist society, everywhere around the world, disembodied language is what creates the dominance hierarchy of that particular culture, that particular society. And so disembodied language is hierarchical, where some people are above you, other people are below you, you have a certain rank, you are having a certain status, a certain importance, a certain power. But all of that has nothing to do with real human interaction. Because human interaction has nothing to do with your power to force others to do what you want them to do. Real interaction is about collaboration. Real interaction is about agreeing on the meaning of words. Really? Yeah, we speak the same language because we agree on the meaning of these words. And to the extent that we speak the same language and don't agree about the same words, we have something that we need to talk about and that we need to get clear on, because there's a problem there. When a chair is not a chair, but let's say a chair is all of a sudden a door or so. I say door and you come to me with a chair. I said, no, the door. I want the door to be closed. Don't come to me with a chair. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? And so language has a particular function in our lives, and it only functions if we both understand what it means. And if there's no ambiguity about it, and this ambiguity has been endlessly, you could say, disabused, if you will, because there is, of course, a lot of ambiguity in language. Inevitably, there is ambiguity because we all grow up differently, and therefore we may use the same words, but these words, they do not mean the same to us, depending on how we grew up. So if I talk about money and I come from a poor background, money means something totally different to me than if I grow up with a golden spoon in my mouth. But okay, let's leave that aside for the time being. That is an ambiguity which we need to talk about and which we need to clarify, because if we do not, then this ambiguity is going to create more problems, which it does, of course, because we don't talk about it, not in the correct way at least. Anyways, what I'm trying to get at here is that what we discuss with our usual way of talking, in which, I repeat, we do not listen to ourselves while we speak in disembodied language. In embodied language, we listen to ourselves while we speak. That's what I do. Yeah. So when you listen to yourself while you speak, the ambiguity is resolved. Something means something to you, and you mean by chair the chair that is right there. And the door is right there. And so there's no ambiguity about it. Everything means what it means in your embodied language. You verified that. And what other people say about things, they can say that a chair means a door. But no, you're not in doubt because other people say so, because you know that a chair is a chair. And you have used that word often enough also in circumstances where chair turned out to be a chair, not a door. Then you have a sense of certainty about your language. But most importantly, you sit on that chair, you use that chair. A chair is for you a piece of furniture in your house, and you know what that chair is. So you hear yourself say chair, and you know it is there. Yeah. And you can talk with anything in your environment, anything you see, hear, or smell, or touch. And you can say, this is what this is. I smell this and that. I hear that and that. I remember so and so. And everything is what it is because you express it and you hear it. So when you listen to yourself, there's no conflict. To you, it is just what it is according to you. And there's no ambiguity. Everything is what it is. Even if you say, I do not understand, then it is just, I don't know, something that you don't understand. Even if it confuses you, you can say it is something that confuses me. It confuses me. Even if it is something that pisses you off or that upsets you or that it is distracting you or it is making you feel afraid or making you feel uncomfortable. Anything that you perceive, anything that you can say is exactly as you say it when you talk with yourself. Yeah. So Embodied language is about talking with yourself. There's no ambiguity. Everything is what it is, and you are who you are. You as a speaker are your own listener, permanently. Yeah, whether you know it or not. Yeah, so you can say, okay, there are moments in which I kind of seem to forget about self-listening. Okay, that happens, and then you get carried away. But there are moments where you come back again to your senses and you hear yourself again, and then you come back and then you hear yourself again. So yeah, so you can say, okay, when I'm having disembodied language and I forget to listen to myself, then I'm off to, I don't know, yeah, I'm just lost. I am just confused. I am just conflicted. I'm stressed out. I'm having all kinds of problems. Everything is negative in some way or another. And then when I come back again to my senses, I listen to myself again. I go, oh yeah, of course. I hear myself. And oh yeah, everything is the way it is for me, the way I say it, because I listen to myself. Yep. All right. So in embodied language, there is no conflict. No conflict. And so when you have this by yourself, you can actually begin to have this with others who also have explored this on their own. So in embodied language, there is never a conflict. Yeah, you may not believe this, but this is really true. There is never. So when you also begin to listen to yourself and discover your own embodied language, when you and I together have embodied language, and we continue to listen to ourselves while we speak, we never have a conflict. It's only in embodied language in which we do not listen to ourselves and in which we're trying to get each other to listen to us, or in which we're forced to listen to others by the other, yeah, because that is what happens. Other listening takes precedence over self-listening in disembodied language. And so in embodied language, there's no conflict. In disembodied language, there's always conflict. And this conflict is always about disagreement, about, I don't know, a certain situation, a certain experience, a certain explanation, a certain observation, a certain description of what something is, who something is, how, what really happened, what's your perception of the situation, and so forth and so forth. But you describe it differently than I do, and I describe it differently than you do, and then there is supposedly conflict between you and me. But that conflict exists only because either one of us is not listening to themselves. It's not about what we're saying, it's about how we're saying it. So once we listen to ourselves, how we're saying it comes into our attention. And we are not having any conflict when we hear how we sound while we speak. And when we hear how we sound while we speak, then what we are talking about is simply what we are capable of talking about. Yeah? So I cannot force you to have any other language than the language that you have. Yeah? I cannot make you see something which you cannot see. I cannot make you feel something you cannot feel. You cannot use language which you are not familiar with. So you can only speak your own language. You can only have your description. You can only have your experience. But do you listen to that experience? Do you express that experience? Do you acknowledge that experience? Because yeah, your description determines whether your individually lived experience is actually acknowledged. So embodied language acknowledges your individually lived experience, but disembodied language doesn't acknowledge your individually lived experience. So there's always that conflict. And then that conflict makes it seem as if it is about a difference of opinion. But no, it is not about that difference of opinion. It is about whether you listen to yourself or not. Yeah. I can go on, but it is whether you listen to yourself or not.